The bench at Fifth and Oak was nothing special to anyone else. Faded green paint flaked off the wrought iron frame, and the wooden slats groaned when you sat down. It leaned slightly forward like it, too, was tired of pretending. The nearby fountain sputtered when it wasn't clogged with leaves, and the trees overhead cast dappled shadows that moved like slow thoughts across the concrete. But to Harold, it was sacred ground. He came every Wednesday, noon, sharp, always with a thermos of lukewarm coffee and a worn leather journal. The edges of the pages were curled, and the spine was bent like an old man's back. He never wrote in it while sitting there, only opened it, flipped through, and folded it shut again, as if performing a ritual. His hands were veined and shaky, yet deliberate. His hair had long gone white, not with age alone, but with guilt. No one asked him why he came. Parks are generous that way. They don't pry, they let people be. So he sat, week after week, season after season, watching faces pass, scanning for the one he hadn't seen in 15 years. The last time Harold saw Michael, it was raining. They had argued in the driveway, two shadows shouting under a porch light. Words were hurled like weapons, years of bottled anger finally breaking open. Harold said things he hadn't meant. Michael had packed his things and left that night, and Harold, he never chased him. 15 years, no calls, no letters, just absence, so loud it drowned the birdsong in spring and muted the laughter of playing children. But Harold came, every Wednesday, because 15 years of silence still left room for hope, a sliver, a whisper. In the early days, he told himself, it was coincidence, that he just enjoyed the view. But after the 5th winter, after the 10th unopened letter, he stopped lying to himself. He was waiting, hoping Michael would walk through that bend in the path and stop, that maybe, just maybe, they'd lock eyes, and all the years would fall away. He wrote letters, dozens of them, some long, some short, some angry, others desperate, all unsent. He kept them in the journal like tombstones, a cemetery of could-have-beens. Today he pulled out the journal and held it on his lap. March 3rd. Michael, I don't know where you are. I imagine a city, a wife. Maybe kids, maybe a dog. I hope you found joy. I hope you found something better than what I gave you. You deserved better. I know that now. I knew it then, but I couldn't say it. I wanted to. I want to now. But how do you start a conversation after 15 years of silence? I miss you. Love. Dad. The page trembled in his hands as he closed the book. A jogger passed, panting softly. A mother pushed a stroller, humming to her baby. Harold's gaze never left the path. Each passerby, another near miss. He wondered sometimes if Michael had come and seen him without saying anything. Maybe stood behind a tree, maybe walked right by, unrecognizable after all these years. Faces change. Postures shift. Grief ages people in ways time alone cannot. Harold flinched when someone approached, a young man, dark hair, broad shoulders. But the stride was wrong. The eyes indifferent. Not Michael. Not today. The bench creaked under his weight as he stood. He tucked the journal under his arm, folded his thermos into his coat pocket, and shuffled away. But this time, just as he turned onto Oak, he glanced back. A girl 20, maybe younger, stood beside the bench, reading something she pulled from the slats. A letter. One of his. He hadn't realized one had fallen out. Harold froze. The girl looked up. Their eyes met, and she smiled. It wasn't his son. It wasn't an answer. But it was something. The next Wednesday, Harold came early. The bench was still empty, and he felt foolish for hoping. But then she arrived. Same girl. Same soft smile. She didn't speak, just sat beside him, carefully, like you might sit next to someone grieving. He offered her coffee. She declined. He opened the journal. She leaned closer, and together, in silence, they read a letter. To Michael, to the son he still loved, to the ghost that wouldn't leave his chest. And as the fountain sputtered beside them, Harold felt for the first time in years a little less alone. Her name was June. Harold learned the second Wednesday after she first sat beside him. She didn't offer it right away. Instead, she handed him back the letter she'd found the week before. Neatly folded, edges straightened, a faint scent of lavender on the paper. "You dropped this," she said. Her voice was soft, whispering, almost, the kind of voice that didn't like to take up too much space. Harold reached for the letter and nodded. "Thank you." They sat for a while, silence folding around them like an old blanket. Then she said, "He's lucky, you know, to be missed like that." Harold didn't answer. He just stared at the letter, the one he hadn't meant to leave behind. Maybe some part of him had let it fall. "I'm June," she said finally, almost apologetically. "You don't have to tell me your name if you don't want to." "I'm Harold." She smiled. That same soft smile from before, and from that moment, she became a part of his Wednesdays. Not a replacement, not a solution, but a witness. They never made plans. June just showed up, sometimes with a cup of tea, sometimes with a sketch pad. She liked to draw, said it helped her think. Most of her drawings were of people in the park, an old couple feeding pigeons, a boy chasing a dog, a man alone with a journal. "Can I draw you?" she asked one day. Harold laughed, not because it was funny, but because he hadn't expected it. "Sure," he said, "but don't make me look too sad." June didn't answer, just started sketching. Her pencil scratched quietly as he flipped through his journal, searching for the next letter. He wasn't sure why he kept showing them to her. Maybe because she never asked too many questions. She just read, and that was enough. April 4th. "Michael, there was a moment. Years ago you asked me if I was proud of you. I said I was, but I was in a hurry, or distracted. Something pulled me away. You looked disappointed. I remember that. I remember that more clearly than anything else. I was always too busy being someone else. A provider, a fixer, a man with expectations. I forgot to be your dad. I'm sorry, love." "Dad." June wiped her eyes with her sleeve. He'd be proud of this letter. Harold didn't respond. He just closed the journal. Late April brought warmer winds. The trees began to bloom. The fountain ran clean and steady. Harold brought sandwiches one Wednesday, and they shared lunch under the budding canopy. "Do you have any children?" Harold asked her, the question bubbling up unexpectedly. "No," she said, then hesitated. "I almost did." She didn't elaborate, and he didn't press. They just watched the birds dive into the fountain spray. Two strangers with quiet wounds. Over the next few weeks, Harold noticed changes. June's eyes seemed heavier, her smiles fewer. She came later, left earlier. One afternoon, she didn't show at all. He waited an hour past noon. She wasn't there the next Wednesday either. On the third week, Harold arrived earlier than usual. A cold knot formed in his chest. He sat on the bench, staring at the bend in the path, waiting. Not for Michael, not anymore. This time, he waited for her, and just when he was about to give up, she came. But she wasn't alone. A man walked beside her, slightly older, hands in his pockets. Beard flecked with grey. Her arm was linked through his, and her face had that soft, quiet peace that Harold had only seen when she was reading his letters. She stopped when she saw Harold. The man gave a polite nod and walked ahead. "Sorry I disappeared," she said. "Life changed." Harold nodded. "He seems nice." "He is." They sat again. The silence was different. Not heavy, but fragile. Like something that might break if leaned on too hard. "I'm pregnant," she said suddenly. Harold looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't showing yet, but her eyes held a weight. Fear, joy, uncertainty. "I wanted you to know," she said, "because I think I understand now." He didn't ask what she meant. He didn't need to. They sat there side by side, strangers tethered by invisible threads of loss and longing. And for the first time, Harold opened his journal and handed it to her. "All of them," he said. "You can read all of them." She took it gently, as if cradling something precious. And there, on the bench at Fifth and Oak, under a sky that threatened rain, a girl read a father's unsent letters. To a boy he still dreamed of. To a man he hoped had forgiven him. To a child he lost, but never stopped waiting for. June's belly began to show by early June. She no longer carried the sketch pad with her. Only a thermos and a small, worn paperback she never read. Her steps were slower, more deliberate. Harold noticed. He noticed everything now. The way she rested one hand protectively over her stomach, the pause before she sat down, the way she looked at the bench before taking her place beside him. Harold brought her water instead of coffee, and fruit. He'd cut apple slices and placed them in a napkin, handing them to her with the awkwardness of someone trying to relearn kindness. They talked more now, not about Michael, not directly, but about fathers, about regrets, about the strange ache that came from having someone who shaped your life by either being too present or not present enough. "I used to sit in the garden," June said, one afternoon, as cicadas hummed in the background. "My father would be in the garage, fixing things. I'd wait until he was done and ask if he wanted to walk with me. Sometimes he did. Most times he didn't." Harold nodded. "I'd promise Michael we'd go fishing. I always cancelled last minute. Work, tired, some excuse." June looked at him, her eyes warm but heavy. "I think that's what hurts most, isn't it? The small things, the things that should have been easy." He swallowed. "I remember every one of them now, each missed game, each broken promise. They play back like reels from an old film, but I can't change a single frame." She reached over and touched his hand. Just a brief squeeze, then silence. One afternoon in July, Harold arrived to find a small package resting on the bench. Brown paper, tied with twine. His name was scrawled across the top. He looked around. No June, no signs of anyone waiting. He opened the package. Inside was a sketchbook. Her sketchbook. On the first page, a drawing of Harold, sitting with his journal, eyes fixed on the horizon. Beneath it, a note. "For Harold. In case I don't make it back before the baby comes. You gave me peace when I didn't know I needed it. Thank you for letting me witness your love, for showing me what waiting looks like. I hope he finds you one day. Love, June." He turned the pages slowly. Drawings of the park, the fountain, children, birds, but always, always, the bench, always Harold. Sometimes alone, sometimes with her, a quiet testimony. Harold sat down. He didn't cry, but his chest felt like it was folding inward. He stayed longer that day, watched the sun dip lower, the shadows stretch longer. Then he did something he hadn't done in over a decade. He took a fresh page from the back of the journal, clicked his pen and wrote, "July 19th. Michael, I met someone who reminded me of you. She listens the way you used to when you were little, with her whole heart. She's having a baby. I don't know if I'll ever meet the child, but I hope they're surrounded by more love than I knew how to give. I miss you." It doesn't fade. People say it gets easier, but that's not true. The missing just changes shape. I'd still give anything for a moment. 1 minute. Even 1 second to say what I never said right. I love you. Always. Dad. The next week, the bench was occupied. Not by June, not by a stranger, by a man, mid-30s. Denim jacket. A slight limp. He stood as Harold approached, and gave a cautious smile. "Mr. Klein?" Harold froze. No one called him that anymore. Not in years. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced," the man continued. I found something. In a thrift shop. Of all places. It had your name, and a bunch of letters, addressed to a Michael Klein." Harold's heart thudded. The man reached into his bag and pulled out a small bundle. The letters. The older ones. The ones Harold thought were lost, or discarded. "I think," the man hesitated. "I think you might be my grandfather." The world tilted. The park disappeared. The sounds dulled. Harold blinked. "What's your name?" "Evan," the man said. "Evan Michael." Harold sat down hard on the bench. "Tell me everything," he whispered. And Evan did. As the afternoon waned, as shadows shifted across the pavement, Harold listened to the voice of a boy he'd never known, but somehow had always been waiting for. Evan returned the next Wednesday, same time, same hesitant smile. He brought coffee black, lukewarm, like Harold's, and sat down as though it was the most natural thing in the world. The space between them filled with silence that didn't need explanation. There was something sacred about the bench at Fifth and Oak, and Harold saw it in Evan's face the way he had once seen it in June's. "You look like him," Harold said. Evan tilted his head. "Michael, my son." Evan nodded slowly. I've been told. I never met him. Harold closed his eyes. I know. They spoke in fragments. Memories unearthed themselves like fossils, painfully, carefully, and with reverence. Evan had been raised by his mother and stepfather. He had known his father only through photographs and half-whispers. He had questions, and Harold answered every one as honestly as he could, even the ones that bruised him to speak aloud. Why did he leave? Harold looked at the trees. Because I didn't know how to love him right. And he never came back. Harold shook his head. No, but I came here. Every week. Hoping. Evan held the bundle of letters in his lap, fingers tracing the edges. He never saw these. No. But you kept writing. I had to. That evening, Evan came to Harold's apartment. It was modest. Books lining the walls. Framed photos gathering dust. One photo caught Evan's eye. A boy, maybe 10, standing by a lake, holding a fishing rod. Smiling awkwardly. That him? Harold nodded. The only time I didn't cancel. Evan picked up the photo, thumb brushing over the glass. He looks happy. He was. That day, they spent hours talking. Harold brought out the journal, showing Evan every page. Each letter read aloud, each one a wound reopened. Some were apologies, others confessions. All of them pieces of a man trying to find his son in the spaces between ink and silence. When they finished, Evan said, "Would you mind if I wrote him too?" Harold blinked. "You don't even know him." "I know the hole he left." And so they began writing. Together. August 2nd. Dad, I don't know what your voice sounded like. I don't know your laugh, or what you were like on bad days, but I know you loved books, and you used to hum while cooking. Mom told me that. I wish you'd stayed. I wish I could have asked you all the things I wonder about now. Why you left. Why you didn't write to me. But I also know you tried. I've seen your letters. The ones you never sent. I forgive you. I just wish you'd let me. Your son, Evan. A week later, June returned. She walked slowly, her belly prominent, her face flushed from the heat. She looked surprised to see Evan and Harold sitting together. When she reached them, Harold stood. "June," he said, voice catching. She smiled and touched his hand. "It's good to see you." Evan rose too. "And sure." June extended her hand. "You must be his grandson." He took it gently. Evan. They sat 3 generations of sorrow and healing. June shared stories of her pregnancy, of late-night kicks and cravings, of fear and hope tangled together. "I'm naming her Eliza," she said. "After my mother." Harold smiled. "She'll be strong." "She already is." They laughed softly. The kind of laughter that comes not from joy, but from knowing someone else understands the ache you carry. When June left, she hugged Harold. Longer this time. Then whispered, "You helped me become ready to be a parent." He watched her go, tears gathering but not falling. Evan said, "You changed her life." Harold looked at the bench. "She changed mine." That night, Evan brought over a small wooden box. Inside, a stack of old cassette tapes. "Mum kept these," he said. "Home recordings. I digitized them." They sat side by side, listening to static-filled snippets of a voice Harold hadn't heard in 15 years. Michael, laughing. Michael reading. Michael singing off-key to a Beatles tune. It was like being haunted gently. Harold wept. Evan didn't look away. By the end of August, Harold's hair seemed whiter. His hands shook more. But something in his posture had shifted. Less weight. Less waiting. The bench still creaked. The fountain still sputtered. But now he had company. And the letters, once unsent, now had a reader. A grandson who looked like his father. A girl who named her daughter with hope. A world that, after years of silence, had finally started speaking back. September came in on the heels of a cool wind, tugging at the leaves and sending them spiraling across the cobbled paths. The bench at Fifth and Oak began to shed its summer hush, replaced by rustling canopies and the distant sound of school children. Harold noticed the shift. So did Evan. They brought jackets now, thicker coffee, quiet endurance. Some Wednesdays, June joined them, wrapped in a scarf, hands resting on her stomach like she was holding the future in place. Her smile was tired but soft. "She kicks harder these days," she said one morning, breathless as she sat. "Like she knows something's coming." Harold smiled, his eyes crinkling. "She's just eager to meet you." June leaned her head on his shoulder. He didn't flinch. It had become second nature. This closeness, not family by blood, but by grief and patience and presence. He often thought how strange it was, the people who stayed and the ones who didn't. Evan began coming more than just Wednesdays. He brought lunch sometimes, stories, old photos from Michael's college days, found in boxes his mother had tucked away. They pored over them together, piecing together a mosaic of the boy, Harold, lost. "He used to play guitar," Evan said one day. Harold blinked. "He did." "Not well," Evan laughed, "but passionately. There's this one tape where he tries to sing a Bob Dylan song. It's bad, but in a good way." Harold chuckled. "He always did like things before his time." "I think you'd have liked each other," Evan said, suddenly solemn. Harold nodded, and his voice was a whisper. "I wish I'd gotten the chance." Mid-September, June didn't show. Not on Wednesday. Not on Friday, when Harold returned on a whim. Evan texted her, called. No answer. A week later, he found a message waiting. "She's here. Eliza June. 14 Os. We're okay." Harold held the phone in trembling hands. Evan read it aloud again, slower. "She's okay," Evan repeated. "They both are." Harold nodded, but something in him cracked open. He hadn't realized how scared he'd been, of losing again, of beginnings that became abrupt endings. 3 days later, June arrived at the bench in a wheelchair, Eliza sleeping in her arms, pink cap askew. Harold stood. "She's beautiful. She's loud," June whispered, beaming. "And she hates the cold." Evan knelt beside them, brushing Eliza's tiny hand with his finger. She stirred and cooed, the sound soft as birdsong. "Would you like to hold her?" June asked. Harold blinked. His throat tightened. "Are you sure? She already knows your voice." June placed the bundle in his arms. Eliza fit perfectly, like a letter written on the first try. She blinked up at him, wide-eyed and curious. Harold wept. It was silent. No shaking, no sobs, just tears tracing the map of his cheeks. "I never got to hold Michael like this," he said. Evan placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're holding part of him now." Harold began writing again. Not to Michael. Not anymore. To Eliza. September 20. "Dear Eliza, you don't know me yet, but I'm the man who waited for your grandfather to come home. And when he didn't, I waited anyway. Until someone like you, someone unexpected and perfect, found me. You're here now, and because of you I've been given a second chance to love without fear. I want to be someone you remember, someone you trust, someone who reads you stories under trees and teaches you how to skip stones. Not because I'm trying to fix the past, but because you deserve the present. Love, Harold." October brought grey skies and softer days. Evan helped Harold clean out his apartment, boxing up old regrets and giving new life to fading memories. They found more photos, more letters, more reasons to keep going. "I'm thinking of moving closer," Evan said one day. "You know, for Eliza, and for you." Harold smiled. "You already feel close." But he knew what Evan meant. He'd spent too many years at a distance. He wanted something tangible now, something rooted. They returned to the bench, every week. Sometimes with June, sometimes with Eliza, in a stroller. The bench still creaked. The trees still whispered. But now, Harold wasn't waiting. He was living. And the letters? They were no longer unsent. They were promises, witnesses, heirs. By November, the trees stood bare, their skeletons cast in pale gold beneath a sun that lingered low in the sky. The park wore its stillness like a worn sweater. The bench, worn but firm, remained the same. But Harold had changed. He walked straighter now. A cane helped with the stiffness, but his eyes, once dulled by memory, held a quiet clarity. Evan met him more frequently. June too, now stronger, pushing Eliza in a deep green stroller that matched the bench's original paint. One morning, Eliza laughed. A soft, sudden sound like a bell. Harold nearly dropped his thermos. "She's smiling now," June said, radiant. "I heard," Harold whispered, as if the sound was sacred. They began keeping track of milestones. Her first call, her first toy grip, the first time she locked eyes with Harold and didn't look away. "I think she remembers you," Evan said. Harold smiled. "Or maybe she knows I won't leave." Thanksgiving came and went, with a quiet dinner in Harold's apartment. June brought cranberry pie. Evan made a turkey too dry to eat. Eliza gurgled her approval anyway. After dinner, they watched an old home movie Evan found. It was grainy footage of Michael as a teenager, playing catch with a younger cousin. "Look at him run," Harold said, eyes misty. "Same shoulders as mine," Evan noted. Harold didn't speak for a while. Then slowly he whispered, "Do you think he would have forgiven me?" Evan looked at him and didn't rush the answer. "I think he already did. Somewhere inside, long before we ever sat on that bench." December snow came quietly. The bench at Fifth and Oak wore a thin white blanket. Still, Harold came, wrapped in scarves and layers, thermos full of tea now. He watched the trees, their limbs outstretched like memory. June joined him. Eliza bundled in a tiny snowsuit. "She's teething," she said, offering Harold the smallest of smiles. "She'll chew through everything," he replied. They sat in content silence. Evan joined them later, with fresh coffee. The three of them formed a circle of warmth beneath the grey sky. Harold handed Evan a wrapped box. "For Eliza," he said, "but maybe wait until Christmas." June reached over and held his hand. "You're part of our family, Harold." He squeezed her fingers. "I always wanted to be." That night, Harold wrote in his journal, December 8, "Dear Eliza, someday you'll hear stories about a man who sat on a bench, who wrote letters he never mailed. And you'll wonder why. It's simple. Love doesn't expire, even when it's buried, even when it's broken. I sat and waited, not because I expected anything, but because love needs somewhere to go. Now, it goes to you, and your mother, and Ev. Thank you for showing me that healing doesn't arrive loudly. It whispers in laughter, in shared glances, in the sound of light against a baby's cheek. I love you, always. Harold." Christmas Eve. Evan brought Eliza to Harold's door. June stayed home, feverish but recovering. Evan held his daughter while Harold unwrapped a gift, a framed drawing of the three of them on the bench. Eliza in his arms, sun slanting between branches. June's style, June's hand. "I miss her today," Harold said softly. "She misses you too," Evan said. Eliza reached for Harold's glasses. He laughed. "You've got your father's hands," he said, "and your great-grandfather's stubbornness." Outside, the snow thickened. Inside, the silence was full. The final winter Harold would ever know arrived soft-footed, with skies the color of old ash and winds that spoke in gentle exhales. January crept across the park with icy patience, but Harold still came every Wednesday. Even when the snow made the bench nearly invisible, even when his joints barked in protest, even when breathing felt like inhaling memories he couldn't yet name. Evan tried to stop him once, suggested staying in. "We can bring the bench to you," he said, with a chuckle. But Harold only smiled and said, "Some places are more than wood and paint. They're chapters. You can't move chapters." So Evan drove him, helped him from the car, carried the thermos, and tucked a thick blanket over his lap. Once he sat down. "I'll come back in an hour," Evan said. "I'll be here." He always was. That day, Harold opened the journal and didn't write. He simply flipped through the letters, pages folded over with time, ink faded, paper crinkled like skin. He read his own heartbreak like scripture, grief recited so long it felt like ritual. He closed it gently, set it beside him on the bench, and waited. But not for Michael. Not anymore. He watched the trees, watched a squirrel dig furiously beneath the snow, watched a young couple walk by, laughing, the sound ringing out like something pure and untouched. And then for the first time in all the years he'd waited, Harold closed his eyes. not from weariness, but from fullness. Evan returned to find Harold still and smiling. His eyes were closed, the thermos empty, the journal beside him, one hand resting on its cover. "Harold?" Evan asked gently. But Harold didn't answer. He was gone, like a breath exhaled, like a note held too long, like a silence finally made whole. The funeral was quiet. Snow fell in slow spirals. June read from his letters. Evan held Eliza close, her little mittened hand clutched around a pine cone she refused to let go of. They buried him in a small cemetery not far from the park. A plaque was placed beneath the tree closest to the bench. It read, "Harold Klein." He waited. He wrote. He loved. Spring came, as it always does. June returned with Eliza, now toddling unsteadily, chasing robins. Evan brought a new bench cushion, green like the old paint. He sanded the splinters, repainted the frame. They still came every Wednesday, not to wait, not to grieve, to remember. Eliza sat beside them, babbling at clouds. And one day, she pointed to the path and said, "Man." They looked. No one was there, but the wind had paused. And somewhere, maybe in that hush, they heard Harold smile.